to get the word out on this important topic. And thank you so much, Sherelle, for providing this opportunity. And it's one of the things that's important to Georgia United is to be this information with you and with the community. And so we love doing it, and think it's very valuable. Pay close attention. I think you'll learn some very valuable tips and tricks with respect to this topic today. And I think it'd be some things that you can directly apply to your life. So pay close attention, and we'll leave some time at the end for questions and answers. And I guess if you can, go ahead and put any questions you may have in the chat, and we'll try to address them from there as well. But thank you again. We'll kind of get started and jump right in here and make best use of your time. So just real quickly, the topic that we're going to cover today is your credit score and credit history, and obviously a couple other things as it relates to credit in general that are kind of important to think about in connection with the same topic here. So we'll cover some of those items as well. But again, thank you for joining us, and we'll kind of dive in and get started here. Hold on a second here. Let me see if I can get things advancing here. Hold on just a minute. Okay, so a lot of y'all know already a lot about Georgia United. We obviously have been a partner with the school district for a long, long time and have done a lot of things in partnership with the school district. We'll continue to do that. And I don't know, some of you know this, and some of you may not, so I want to go ahead and mention it. Our credit union was actually started by the CAB educators and actually your school district educators in 1958. So we've always done a lot to partner with y'all, always will do. And this is one of the things that we love doing, is sharing this kind of information. So I'll put my contact information at the end in the chat, and reach out to me if you have any questions, or if we can help you with anything as it relates to your financial life as well. But again, we love presenting this information to you in the form of these webinars and seminars. And so very valuable information, I think, to share with you today. Okay, a lot of you already know about, I think, the credit union and bank differences. So I'm not going to go into that in great detail, but the bottom line there, the high level point there is that, Georgia United and credit unions are not for profit. So we don't have shareholders that we're paying dividends to and that kind of thing. So that does afford us the opportunity to provide lower rates on auto loans, mortgages, that kind of thing. And then also on the savings side, to provide typically higher rates on savings products. So a lot of advantages to you as an employee of the DeKalb County School District to take advantage of, and hope you will, in terms of Georgia United. So anyhow, that's just a quick slide on that. So getting into the topic here today, why we need credit, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, but primarily more focusing on credit report, credit score, your credit history, why that's so important. And we're going to kind of go into some things that you may not realize, some information that you may not have heard about or realize in terms of your credit score and credit report and credit history, and why that's so important. And not only just to know what it is and check it every now and then, but especially as it relates to your credit history, super, super important to check that on a regular basis. And we're going to go into some information, details about how to do that, and when to do that, and why to do that. So obviously, your credit score, for example, can impact a whole lot of things in your life other than just the obvious. And we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit as well. And then, as Sherelle mentioned, we're going to talk about how you can keep your credit score as high as you possibly can, and then why that is important. And then if you get in a situation where you have some challenges, excuse me, and you need to work on your credit score, we'll talk about how to do that too. Excuse me, and then tips on how to build and maintain a strong credit score as it, obviously as it goes along with all that. Okay, why build good credit? Why have a good credit score? And I kind of referred to that just a second ago. But if you're, obviously, if you're looking to get an automobile loan or mortgage or that kind of thing, super important to have a high credit score, because it impacts obviously how much you pay it for that loan, your interest rate, for example, on that loan. But some other things that you may not realize, your credit history is important for a lot of reasons in addition to that. It can actually be checked when you're applying for a job, your credit history. Now you have to give them formal written approval to do that, but that is something that is done. And the point there of that, I guess, is the logic maybe could be that, if you haven't done all you need to do to, maintain your credit history, a positive credit history, a positive credit score, that may be an indication, potentially, it may be an indication of how you might perform as an employee. So it is a related topic to that too. And they do, and they will, and can check your credit history as a part of even of a job application. So obviously allows you to qualify for the lowest interest rate on loans, and then just the ability to get new credit if you need it. Obviously on a mortgage loan, they check a lot of other things in addition to your credit history and credit score, but super, super important, obviously, for that as well. Okay, in your credit report, so the two main things we're going to talk about today is your credit report, credit history, and then your credit score. And obviously, they're directly related. And if you haven't checked your credit history in a long time, I really, really encourage you to do that. Obviously, you need to know what is out there in terms of your credit history. And then things that are on there, typical, pieces of information you can see on the screen, your name, social security number, date of birth, address, that kind of thing. Employment history, bankruptcies, judgments, liens, lawsuits, public records on you, inquiries that you initiated. And by the way, too, while we're in the neighborhood there, if you inquire into your own credit history and check that, it's considered a soft pull, so it's not going to impact your credit score. Hard pulls, if you will and can impact your credit score. And we're going to kind of talk about that in a few minutes here as well. So, but anyhow, if you are checking yourself, is considered a soft pull, is what the kind of terminology for that is, and it's not going to impact your credit score. And then obviously, obviously loans, credit applications, that kind of thing are obviously on your credit history, credit report. And by the way, too, obviously, and this is something you may not be familiar with, but there's three major credit reporting agencies: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. They all have a little bit different group or parts of information or pieces of information on you and on your credit history. So you need to check all three, because again, they, whoever is your lender or your creditor, they will report to specific agencies on specific things. So it's important to check all three agencies, all three credit histories on you, because they all contain a little bit different information on you. And then, by the way, too, they will have potentially a different credit score. So that's important as well. And it's important to know whomever you are extended credit by. For example, on an automobile loan, you need to know who they are using to pull your credit score. And so that's important, obviously, to know. And equally important is to know what your score is and know what they're going to be pulling ahead of time, too. And obviously, you want to have the highest score possible that you can. And we're going to talk about that in just a second, too, what the range of scores are and what you really kind of need to shoot for and that kind of thing in terms of your credit score. Okay, so who can look at your credit score? We talked about this a little bit earlier. Obviously, lenders, landlords, potential employers, insurance companies. So just while we're in the neighborhood here, so your credit score can impact the amount that you pay for automobile insurance. You may or may not know that. A lot of people are, some people aren't. So super important. Another reason why it's super important to have a high credit score, because it can impact other things in your life aside from the obvious. Okay. If you're going to check your credit report, credit history, super, super important. I'm going to repeat some things here that are kind of very important for you to walk away with. The only place you want to do that is annualcreditreport.com. There are actually imposter sites out there. There are sites that will claim to provide you similar information, but there may be a fee for it. Now, there are a lot of places where you can get your credit score for free. Some of the credit card companies and that kind of thing will provide that. But again, you need to be aware of which score they're providing you. The FICO Beacon score is typically the one that's most commonly used in terms of your credit score and basing the interest rate that you're paying for an automobile loan, for example. But again, you need to be aware of which score that is being provided to you, whether it's a FICO Beacon score or what it is, because there's a bunch of different scores actually out there, and they may be all different. So you need to understand, which score they are providing, and then zero in on that and make sure what that particular score is for you. And to get your credit history, be aware there are, obviously with AI on the scene in full force now, and so many other things that are out there, you just need to be real careful where you get your information from. And again, the only place you really want to go to is annualcreditreport.com. When you go there, you will see your credit history. If you want your credit score, that's not available typically from those three sites that I just mentioned, those three agencies, based on you pulling your report. Now that score is available from each agency if you want to pay a fee or look at it, from a different perspective there. But you will see obviously your credit history, and you need to be aware of what that credit history is. So the three agencies are shown up on here: Experian, Equifax, and TransUnion. They are the three major agencies that will have information on you in terms of your credit history. And by the way, too, so some of the information that we provide here is as of today. So I'll give you an example of that. So it used to be before COVID that you had a limited number of times that you could pull your credit history and get your credit report for free. And then when COVID happened, when the pandemic happened, the three major agencies agreed to provide it free on a weekly basis. And they have actually now extended that permanently. So whereas it used to be you could get one free report, per year, and actually in Georgia you could get two because there was a state statute. Now you can get your credit history credit report for free on a weekly basis if you wanted to. And you might say, well, maybe that's a little overkill. Maybe it's not. It depends on kind of what your level of comfort is with kind of keeping track of all of that. But we're going to kind of go into some details in just a second why you might want to at least consider that, and especially in terms of identity theft. So that's one of the reasons why it's so important to check your credit history on a regular basis, because that may be the first place that identity theft shows up and makes you aware. I was doing a presentation like this, and a gentleman came up to me afterwards and said, well, I took your advice and I checked my credit history credit report on a regular basis. And I said, well, great. And he said, you don't understand. He said, that's the first place that I found out that someone had taken out a loan for an automobile, actually several automobiles and a mortgage under his identity. And that's where it showed up. That's where he was first made aware of that. So super, super important to check your credit history, not only to know what it is and to understand, all of your loans and, credit history inquiries and all that kind of stuff. But also if there's anything that's inaccurate on there, you want to make sure it's taken off. So super important to be looking at your credit score, credit history on a regular basis, just to kind of prevent some of those things from happening. And also, while we're kind of in the neighborhood on that subject, and speaking of identity theft, the single most important thing that you can do to protect yourself from identity theft is to freeze your credit. And so you need to do that with each of the three credit reporting agencies individually. It's not hard to do. So once it's frozen, no one can take out credit under your identity, including yourself, until it's unfrozen, which is free to do as well. Again, this is a very easy process. And also, I would encourage you to, if you have young people in your life or family members or relatives or whatever, you might want to encourage them to look at freezing their credit as well. because what's happening is the bad actors are actually targeting younger people because they are thinking probably that, you know, what young person will be checking their credit history, that kind of thing. And so word to the wise. So it's important not only for you, but for young people in your life, whether it's family members, relatives, or whatever. Super, super important to consider freezing your credit. And again, that's the single biggest thing you can do to protect yourself against identity theft. So something that you want to really seriously consider for yourself, for family members, and even young people in your life. And we provide a whole separate webinar seminar on the topic of identity theft. And that's one of the topics that we cover in depth, is the importance of freezing your credit, freezing that so no one can take out any kind of loan or credit under your identity. So wanted to mention that to you as well while we're kind of talking about it from that related perspective. So super, super important. Okay, credit score. So we're going to talk a little bit about that right now. So ranges from a FICO perspective, 300 to 850. Obviously, the higher number, the better. Now, that number obviously can change over time and will based on how you manage your credit. The main takeaway here, several main takeaways. So you want to kind of shoot for the range of around 740, 760. That will typically get you the lowest interest rate, for example, on an automobile loan. It's not going to do you any good to get, to shoot for a perfect score or in the 800s or whatever. It's not really going to provide any additional benefits when you get past, again, the 740, 760 score, because that 760 is typically 740 to 760 typically considered what they call A credit, which is what you kind of want to shoot for, because again, that's going to get you the best rate, for example, on an automobile loan. So that's kind of what you want to target and shoot for. It's not worth, again, going through all the effort. If you have a better score than that, fine. That's great. And it shows that you've done a very good job at managing your credit. But where you typically want to land, again, is in that range that I mentioned. So you need to have an idea what your score is right now. And then we're going to talk about in just a few minutes here too, some things you can do to improve your score. If it's not quite where you want it to be, there are some things obviously that you can do to improve it. If you've had some challenges in your life, we've all had them, that may have impacted your credit score. It's just going to take some time. It's going to take some dedication to doing certain things to bringing that score back up to a range where you want it. And Sherelle mentioned that kind of at the beginning. So we're going to kind of talk about that a little bit too and how you might go about doing that. So components of your credit score, we're going to talk about that a little bit. So 35% of your score is based on you paying your bills on time. And so a couple practical suggestions here. And what I'm going to try to do as we go through this too is kind of relate some things that we can do or we do as a credit union to actually help you manage all of this. And so one quick example here is your credit score based on your 35% is based on your payment history. So that means paying your bills on time. If you set that up in an automated fashion, and we offer a service called bill pay. So then you can ensure that your bills are paid on time. We all get so busy in our lives today. If you forget to make a payment on time or whatever, that can potentially impact your score. And that's actually 35% of your score. So to make your life a little bit easier, set all of that up on an automated basis. And then your bills are paid on time. And that can have a big impact on your credit score. So 35% of your score is based on you paying your bills on time. The next largest percentage you see here is really your debt utilization. So 30% of your score is based on how much of your available credit that you've used. So just to kind of give you a practical example of that, If you have, and just to pull a number out of there, if you have $1,000 of credit available to you, and you get above 30%, and ideally, actually, I would shoot for more in the range of like 25%. So, for example, if you have $1,000 of credit available to you, you kind of want to. Sorry, we went ahead here for a second. You kind of want to shoot for, in the case of $1,000, using $250 of that. If you get much higher than that, then it's going to have a negative impact on your credit score. So again, some people say 30%. I kind of like to look for maybe 25% range, 25 to 30% range. So again, keep it in that range. You get any higher than that, and that can negatively impact your credit score. So length of credit history, that's the next largest percentage, which is 15%. So let's talk about that just for a second. If you have some credit cards, for example, that you don't use frequently, and so maybe someone with well intentions gives you the advice of closing off that credit card, that's not something you necessarily want to do, because if you've had that credit card for a long time and you close it off, again, that can have a negative impact on your credit score. So a suggestion there would be, consider that, and then charge maybe a little bit on that credit card or whatever it is and pay it off every month. So again, you kind of really need to take a deep dive in terms of how you're managing the credit that you have available to you, and don't arbitrarily, close off accounts or that kind of thing, because it can have a negative impact. And then other, components you see here, new credit, so that's a percentage of your score as well. And if you're taking out a lot of new debt all at once, then potentially that can have a negative impact on your score. And then types of credit. So you want to have a healthy mix. So, installment, revolving, all that kind of stuff. And by the way, too, this 35% of your score we talked about on payment history, and the 30% utilization, debt utilization, that refers to, so there's two different major types of credit, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail there, but we'll go into some. So there's revolving and installment. So an installment would be more like an automobile loan. Revolving is like maybe if you have a credit card. This primarily deals with this debt utilization with your revolving accounts. So again, if you have $1,000 of credit available to you on a credit card, you don't want to get much more above 30% for sure, and ideally maybe like more in the 25% range of what you've used, and then pay your bills on time. So those are the two largest percentage components of your credit score, and they're probably the two that you want to focus the most on. But again, we went over some other components here too that you kind of need to keep an eye on. So how much is safe to spend on credit cards? We kind of already discussed this a little bit, but just in terms of an example here, if you have a $10,000 limit, then obviously you want to, keep that 25 or 30%. So $2,500 to $3,000. So you don't want to get much above that in terms of what you're utilizing of that total available credit, because again, that can have a negative impact on your credit score. In terms of poor credit, so we're going to kind of talk about that. So we talked about your credit score having impact, for example, on the interest that you pay an automobile loan. So let's look at a practical example of that. So let's just say with a great credit score or good credit score, you can obtain a interest rate of 5%, and you can see the monthly payment, and you can see the total amount paid on the loan over time. Well, if your credit score is not so good and you're paying a 12% interest rate, over time for that same automobile, you're paying around $6,000 more. So that's just one quick example of the impact of a good credit score versus a not so good credit score. And so again, you want to shoot for the highest credit score that you can obtain, again, a reasonable credit score like we talked about earlier. But this is just one example. If you look at this example in terms of a mortgage, these numbers are obviously a lot bigger. So super, super, super important to kind of focus on your credit score, know what it is, figure out a way to improve it if you need to, and then certainly know what impacts your credit score. We've kind of talked about all of that already. And then two, like on your credit card, so we'll go over another quick example here on that. So if you have a credit card payment and you're paying, and this is just one example, $2,000, you're paying the minimum on that. A 4% is typically what of the declining balance is typically how that's calculated. You can see how long it would take you to pay that off just by paying the minimum balance due every month. And you can see what the cost savings are or the increase in cost if you just pay the minimum monthly payment amount. Whereas if you, for example, paid $100 per month instead of 4%, you're shaving off almost 7 years of paying on that account, and then saving a lot of money. You can see here on interest, and then the actual cost savings that you are going to have. So again, super, super important about how you manage your credit and your credit score and the amount that you owe. But this is just a practical example of what it kind of means to you from a financial perspective in terms of savings with a good credit score, bad credit score, and then how you manage the amount of debt that you have and how you're paying it off. So some really, quick examples of that. But again, too, even on a mortgage. So a really good best practice on a mortgage, put a little bit extra on the principal every month of the mortgage, the principal, and you'd be amazed how much money you will save and the amount of time that you can shave off in terms of your payment history on a mortgage by applying a little bit extra to the principal every month. So it's easier said than done. We all kind of get busy and maybe don't think about that, or haven't set up our budget to where this is possible to do this. And it's not possible all the time. We run into situations, all of us have. This is just an idea for a best practice to really kind of save you some money with respect to that as well. Okay, don't have a credit history. There's some things that you can do to work on that. And especially, we mentioned younger people and the ones that are just kind of starting out with all this. There's some ideas that you can look at. We offer something called a secured credit card. Georgia United does, and basically you put your own money in there, and you're basically borrowing that back, but you're building up your credit history by doing that. You're making payments on a credit card. So that's a possibility to start building up your credit. Cosigner, that's obviously always been around as an option. And it depends on your level of comfort with doing that with a family member or a young person, that kind of thing. But there's ways to kind of build a credit history. And one of the things too is when I mentioned the 3 individual agencies, kind of need to look at all 3 of them. They will all report on different types of credit for you. And there is some progress being made with some of the bureaus in terms of you getting credit, for example, for paying your rent payment on time. So obviously, when you're making payments on your mortgage, that gets, submitted, but there are some changes being made in the industry to give you benefit and to give you credit for paying rent payments on time and that kind of thing. So super important to kind of look at your overall history. If you need to repair it, if you need to start it or build it, there's ways that we can help you do that as well. So financial goals, this is a related topic. We're not going to spend a lot of time on that. But to the extent that you manage your credit well and your credit history, some things that you need to kind of be thinking about along with that is short-term goals, intermediate, long-term. And obviously, we mentioned too the time savings that you can enjoy and money by paying things off early or paying a little bit more on the principal. per month, and that will allow you to kind of maybe attack some of these other goals that you have in your life from a financial perspective. So they're all kind of related, but need to kind of be looking at the big picture too of all your finances at the same time. To rebuild your credit score, we kind of talked about that a little bit. So a couple things on that. Obviously, check your credit reports, your credit history on a regular basis. If there's things that are inaccurate on there, then you need to get them off, because that can potentially be lowering your credit score. And so super important. And we mentioned the importance of looking at it from an identity theft perspective. So if there are things that are on your report that are inaccurate, then you need to reach out to the agency to have those corrected. Paying all your bills on time, we talked about that. Paying down debt, we talked about that. By the way, on that subject too, so if you have a lot of high interest rate credit card debt, for example, or other types of debt, reach out to us. We'd love to help you with that. There's a lot of ways that we can potentially do consolidation loans or combine some of those things together at a lower interest rate, help you save some money based on having a lower payment. Now you have to be dedicated to utilizing those savings to pay off maybe other debt and those kind of things that you have. And everyone's financial situation is unique, obviously, but always don't be afraid to reach out to us. There's ways we can help. Emergency fund, that's not really a direct topic, but I did want to mention that to you here. So you need to be making your minimum payments or more, ideally, if you can, but it's super important to have that emergency fund set up for yourself. And we have a whole webinar based on the topic of budgeting, which is kind of where this fits in. But if you have that emergency fund built up, and then you have some kind of unexpected expense with your automobile or whatever, then you have a fund to pay for that, as opposed to putting on a credit card. So how does that help you? So if you're not having to put it on your credit card and you get a lot higher up on that debt utilization that we talked about, then that's definitely an advantage. So having that emergency fund built up, super, super important, even as it relates to the topic that we're talking about here. So a small line of credit, applying for a secured credit card. We talked about the secured credit card a little bit, but it's great to establish that solid history. So if you have a small line of credit paid off, that all helps your credit score, and especially as it relates to a mortgage, because there's a lot more that goes into a mortgage than just your credit score, but certainly that can help. And then automate your bill paying. We talked about that, the benefits of doing that. And actually that's safer. So there's, again, a whole seminar that we go into on identity theft. There's a lot going on now in terms of checks that you may put in your mailbox being captured and washed and rewritten. So actually bill pay is a lot safer from that perspective too. So you're paying your bills on time, which is increasing your credit score and also preventing yourself from identity theft. One quick tip that we typically provide in that identity theft seminar when we talk about that. So if you're still writing checks, one piece of advice is to use a gel-based ink pen instead of a ballpoint pen. It makes it a little bit harder for them to wash that check and rewrite it. But again, it can save you a lot of time and effort in your life too to set up that bill pay. So from a lot of perspectives, it's really important. That's really an important service that we provide, others provide, but we'd love to help you with that as well. But again, it can help a lot of things as it relates to your credit score. And then again, ask for any assistance and help from us. We'd be glad to help you with any and all of that. So building a strong credit score, we kind of talked about a lot of these things already. Paying your bills on time, keeping that credit utilization or debt utilization really around 25% or below, and really actually probably no more than 30%. I mean, 50 is really up there, but 25 to 30 is kind of what you want to shoot for. Don't close too many accounts at once. We talked about that. Don't open several new accounts at the same time. That's important as well, especially if you're in the market for getting a mortgage or that kind of thing. You really want to kind of keep that at a minimum or not do that immediately before getting the mortgage. So let's talk about another real practical application here. For example, on purchasing an automobile. So there's several things involved in that with that process that relate to your credit score. If you go shopping for an automobile and dealerships or whomever is checking your credit score behind the scenes in a lot of different places that you might not even realize, several or a lot of inquiries, which are those are hard inquiries into your credit, can have an impact, a negative impact on your credit score. So what's the word of advice there? The prudent thing to do would be to get pre-approved ahead of time. We can help you with that, obviously, but to get pre-approved ahead of time for the amount that you need to spend, then when you go purchase an automobile, you're just negotiating on the price of that car and not the financing of it. And so that's really a best practice to go about that process. And then also, what that does is you're not having a lot of separate credit inquiries all at the same time. And especially if you spread that process over a long period of time, if you keep it condensed into, ideally like a week or so, they know you're shopping for an automobile. But if that process gets extended over a long period of time, then that's potentially sends a message of you may have some challenges or whatever. So you're looking for a lot of different ways to kind of look at some of the credit that you have. So again, that's the best practice. And by the way, too, on that, while we're in the neighborhood there, we offer a service called auto buying, auto assistance, which makes that super easy. So there's actually a process where you can say what kind of vehicle you're looking for. They'll shop for you, find that vehicle at the most cost-effective price, and actually negotiate the price for you. Then you get pre-approved with us with a loan at the same time, and you're done. Save so much headache and heartache and time on the weekends and whatever to kind of accomplish that process. I'm just giving you a real practical example of a best way of going about that, and then having the most minimum impact on your credit score. So all this stuff is related in one form or fashion. So you kind of want to look at that bigger picture. All that relates and can relate back to your credit score. Okay, ordering a report on a regular basis. We talked about the importance of that. You need to check your credit history with each individual agency. Do it on a frequent basis for a lot of reasons that we discussed. And again, it's free to do that on a weekly basis. And then also, I'm going to emphasize again the importance of freezing your credit. Again, that's the single most important thing you can do to protect yourself from identity theft. But let's look at that practically. So let's say you've frozen your credit and your lender is looking at Equifax, just to pick one of the three. And so you would have to unfreeze your credit with Equifax for a certain limited amount of time so that automobile loan can be taken out and then freeze it again. But again, that's super, super important to do. So, and be thinking about that too, again, for any young people in your life in terms of freezing their credit. Okay, pitfalls, obviously goes without saying, but some of the buy here, pay here places may seem attractive, but you're paying a lot more for that same item over time than if you were to buy it outright. And certainly if you were to use a credit card, keep those paid off or paid down. And these are just some simple practical things. High interest rate debt consolidation. If you have a lot of high interest rate, debt on credit cards or automobile loans or whatever, come to us. We can help you with that and potentially get you a lower interest rate and kind of help with all of that. But again, it's kind of an individual basis on all of that. So we would kind of, you're going to have to look at your whole financial picture to see what makes most sense in terms of all of this, but just kind of be aware of all that as you go through looking at these topics and your credit score and credit history. And that's basically the presentation. And so I wanted to share that with you. And if we have any questions, be happy to kind of go through some of those.
All right, Steve, I don't see anything in the chat.
Okay.
So except what I put in there. But if anyone has any questions, feel free to either put it in the chat or come off mute.
Happy to discuss any of that. And again, I just kind of wanted to hit the highlights with you that are important as it relates to this subject. We can go into a lot more detail. And by the way, too, I would advise you to kind of do some research on your own. And you can, research a lot of the same information. Just be careful about where you look. And basically, let me kind of give you some practical websites. Obviously, our website is a great place to go, GUCU.org. We have a lot of information on this topic. Clark Howard, Gene Chatsky, Dave Ramsey. There's a lot of really good government websites. Federal Trade Commission, FTC, has a lot of great information related to what we've talked about today. So do some due diligence, visit some of those sites, and then just, kind of be careful. Annualcreditreport.com is the only place you really want to go to check your credit history. And so there's imposter sites out there, and there's places that will charge you a fee and that kind of thing. So just be cautious about that, would be a word of advice maybe for that. But, again, your credit history and credit score is so important. It impacts a lot of things in your life, and you really want to be on top of all that, especially from an identity theft perspective. And we kind of talked about that a little bit in the presentation here. So just a couple of things for you to kind of consider and walk away with. And we finished up a few minutes early, but I wanted to kind of give you some time to kind of have time for questions. And if there are not any, I can kind of give you a few minutes back to your day. But if you have any questions, we'd be happy to consider them. And by the way, too, share this information with young people in your life. We've actually do a lot of that with DeKalb. We have webinars and seminars that we've conducted for all ages, actually, from pre-K to high schoolers. We've done a lot of webinars and seminars with high schoolers to kind of get them oriented to this kind of information and the importance of it. So any and all ages, it's applicable. And we can all kind of, if nothing else, kind of revisit this once in a while in our life to kind of make sure we're on track and on top of all this.
All right, so I will quickly, I'll share my screen, and I was doing this really quick, so I don't know if I did this 100% correct, but I think I copied and pasted everyone in there really quick for the drawing. We don't have concert tickets again, but yeah, I will definitely get something out to you. I'll do that real quick. And I do see someone asked for a copy of the PowerPoint. Now, what we will have is a copy of the presentation. That's going to be on our Thrive page. So we'll do that. Is Angelia Shed still on the call? Angelia still here? Shame on Angelia for getting off the call. Let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That's a lot of people. Let's see. Maybe I didn't do that right. Let's try that one more time. That's a lot of people on that wheel. I'm not sure if that's 100% accurate, but we're going to keep going until we get somebody that's on here. Is that her again? The email up there. That person is not on here because I don't see them on there. All right, we're going to do this one last time, then I'm going to do something random. Oh, you don't see your name, Carla? Well, you know what? Then guess what? I'm going to have to not do that. For the sake of time, what I'll do then is let me just screenshot these 12. Let's see, 1, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12. Okay, yeah. So really it's 10, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10. Let me do a quick screenshot of these names, and I'm going to do this off of the off of our time here. So my apologies. I was over here trying to multitask, and clearly it didn't work out well for me. All right, so I have the names, and I will just do that off the call to not hold you all up, and we'll just go from there. Let me stop sharing, and I definitely will stop recording too. So yeah, so Steve